Now, just showing you, this is what we see today is Church Street running, I'm scared to say north to south now because I also struggle to, to orientate myself. This is more or less, I think, northwest to east, southeast. But nevertheless, that used to be Church Square with Church Street, which we still have in the town today. And it compares to Pretoria, which also have the Church Square with the Church Street and then Market Street, which later on became vice versa. I can't remember exactly now. And then the plan of Potchefstroom, similar Kerkplaats towns. Just to connect to what Piet explained earlier on, that it was also regarded as a garrison town, and there's a very interesting result of the war in the development of the town plan. The earth numbers are irregular, and that corresponds to a barricade that was set out in the war. So that is an area for further study. If you want to go and study the earth numbering from the historic maps, and you could actually then predict where the barricades were. That's an interesting fact. Just here, you'll see this picture again. It's the second church on Church Square. The first one, unfortunately, didn't last long. It's a very big building, and it was built with temporary building materials, which we'll touch on just now. But later on, they built another church on the Church Square, the Nederduits Hervormde Kerk. I don't know how to when you start translating these terms, it's all the same in English. So, Nederduits Hervormde Church was still there, their second building, and then by this time, Church Street wasn't residential any longer. These are civic little buildings, which we'll demonstrate just now. In this picture, this corresponds to all the travel notes that says large church in town with approximately 30 houses around it. And if you count the dark urban here, that also corresponds with more or less this time period. This is a closer look at Church Square, and this was this church, actually. This is the Nederduits Hervormde Church at Holy Communion weekend or week, with the tents and ox wagons, etc., on the Church Square, and ample puddles of water. Now, just to explain to you this what happened in Church Square at that point. This was after the residential period when people started settling in the town. We have the bank there, the Volksraad building there. That is an unnamed building. This was the Grand Hotel, and this is obviously the church. There was another depiction of the Grand Hotel on a postcard, which I found in the Rustenberg archive. That would be a view from the back. And I guessed or estimated this to have been around the 1920s, just looking at the automobiles that were parked here. It was obviously a festival of some sort. Now, we're talking about the building methods. So when the voortrekkers decided to settle somewhere, they started off with a temporary kind of building. The temporary buildings were built fast and from readily available materials such as timber poles, thatch, and mud. Now, the larger you go with that kind of building method, the shorter the lifespan of the building is. That's why we often find in areas where we have farms, homesteads, or even in the cities, we still find the original rondavel, which was the first building that was built, very much like the lecture that you gave us on Gandhi's house. The rondavel's easy to build, easy to stay on site, and fairly easy to add on to pleasantly. Now, even the new Doppert Church, the new Gereformeerde Kerk, which also occurred in Kerk Street, was built thatch roof, elaborate stepped gable, and mud walls, and also sadly didn't last very long and had to be replaced with a more permanent building. This very descriptive picture is from 1834, and it's the little town of Philippolis. But it explained this building method story very well, in the sense that we have a structure here consisting of poles and thatch. And that is how these structures would have started off. First building the timber structure, and then covering it with mud and the thatch. Examples of this kind of structure is displayed here, and obviously the first house built by the Bronkhorsts on the Kruger farm is a hartbeeshuis, and it's exactly this kind of building method. And although it sounds very ordinary to us, at that point it was important enough to be displayed at the Paris Fair in 1900, and that is the picture that you also find inside, I think it's this building, a beautiful watercolor depiction of a Boer hartbeeshuisie. This is the house built by Kruger himself on his farm, Boekenhoutfontein, in the same fashion, on a good sturdy stone foundation. This is just another picture drawing explaining to you how that method works. Now, the first Anglican church in Rustenberg was built in 1870, and it also consisted of a thatch roof and clay walls. There's a beautiful story connected to this church, which we'll tell you just now. And this is a typical street house from Rustenberg, also in that building method, and it's from 1900, the year 1900. The more permanent structures was basically the same, with the exception that the thatch roof was now replaced with a tin roof, a sheet metal roof, and it was expensive and it was scarce and it was difficult to get here, and that's why we have that beautiful story about Paul Kruger in the Warenhuis where the roof sheets were too short, and he promptly took them off and drove over it with the wagon so that it stretches. And that is the first on my on the Paul Kruger slide. I have a picture of the sheet metal with those corrugations flattened out. The clay-fired bricks were very versatile. They enabled the locals to build intricate patterns like that. So from this point onwards, the architecture started to flourish. Important and significant places. I need to also interweave this into the story. I'm going to talk to you again. One of the most beautiful and significant places is the place where the Gereformeerde Kerk was found or established, and that's under the big syringa tree in Church Street. This is what it looked like in its prime. This was also a place where the Volksraad had some meetings before they had a building. This is the syringa tree in dissected. This is the land surveyor map of where the stump is today, and it's right adjacent to earth number 4 in Church Street. Earth number 4 is where the Dopper Church, or the Gereformeerde Kerk, which with the stepped gables, was located. So it's just adjacent to the Hervormde Church, just adjacent to Kerksplaats for easy access. This is the founder of the Gereformeerde Kerk, and that happened in 1859, where they congregated under this tree to establish this church. Down the visual axis, you can see the Hervormde Church, the heart of the city, the heart of the town, on the apex of Church Street. Just a little bit more about these, the Gereformeerde Church. This is the first building with a thatch. This was the building that replaced it. It had a corrugated iron roof. It was almost an exact replica of the Reformed Church on Church Square. If you can remember what it looked like, I can perhaps quickly go back. You can see it right there. Also a very big church, and it's very, very similar. In 1960, this church was demolished. By that time, the new Gereformeerde Kerk was already built. It was completed in 1959. And there's a beautiful story about the procession. After the last service in this church, the whole congregation walked in file to the new building, and then this building was demolished in Church Street. Then we get to the Moedergemeente. There was, and I'm not going to go into it, I'm sure you already had a lecture on the conflict. I tried to understand the detail of the conflict, and I just decided at the end, what's important for us is there was a rift, and the two churches split. But for the town and the heritage layering of the village of Rustenberg, that was checkmate. Because the most important place on the city grid had competition. The very big and elaborate church by the very powerful, later on, Engela Kerk, was built off the main arena, right there. And then the council officers across it makes a very dynamic relationship, plus the addition of the Kruger Monument right there. And that is when I started my investigation, where I thought the heart of the town would have been, like anybody else. So it was a very interesting layering of the history. We've already talked about the fact that this building, magnificent as it was not to be used as a church straight away. It served as a hospital in the war. And today it very thoroughly still serves the community as a church for weddings, for services, etc. Depiction of Nagmaal, communion weekend or week, also around this church. We can just see how the architecture developed more detail, and also it withstood the test of time, because it's still a beautiful building. These are my own pictures, and you can still see that sense of serenity that we can still appreciate today. The Rustenberg Town Hall was constructed right across the street from the new Engela Church. The first town hall looked like this. It was completed in 1912, and it also served as the town's first bioscope. And the people were really, really, really excited. When this opened, they started queuing for the opening function at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was really a very, very coveted, long-awaited facility for the town. Unfortunately, it also demised in a fire, but it was replaced in 1933, shortly after that, by the current building as we know it today. In front of this building already, in front of the old version, we had the statue of Paul Kruger, and that was, I was fortunate to find a picture of the sculptor next to his artwork, just to show us the scale of it. His name was Jean-Georges Arcade. And then incidentally, at the heart of this town's birth sits religion, sits the eternal, sits the way the villagers chose to celebrate it. And lo and behold, I was told at the library, at the Engela Moedergemeente, that this Bible has now been removed because it's been vandalized. That's why Paul Kruger sits there empty-handed. But it is just symbolic of the checkmate that the poor town is experiencing in terms of its town grid, in terms of my historic layering and understanding of how it happened, why it happened, how would it have been good to keep on developing. The interesting story about the Anglican Church, the first Anglican church, remember I told you it was also built with the thatch roof in 1871. And then in the 1960s, very interestingly, a person by the name of Conrad Vogts did this little bit of research. I found it on artifacts, and he deciphered all the maps to his disposal and photographs, and he established that this little church was also located on Church Street, right next to the Gereformeerde church. So you had a whole row of churches in Church Street right next to each other, in the vicinity of the Kerkplaats, the soul of the city. So, 1967, this had to be demolished, and there was a lady from the community who lobbied for its protection. She wasn't successful, but after it was demolished, it was rebuilt in the old cemetery. So if you drive around the town and you see this it burnt down in 2009, so you still see the carcass of the little original Anglican church, very prominently there. I just grouped buildings together to show you red brick buildings. Rustenberg started to celebrate its ability to produce beautiful architecture. The Rustenberg Synagogue from 1924, the Rustenberg Station from 1905, the house of Karl Hein. He was an important engineer in the vicinity. It was originally a red brick building, and later on it was plastered. And this little building here, referred to by Piet earlier on, was the Masonic Hall, right behind the Moedergemeente, also a red brick building. The more stately buildings or more decorated buildings in the form of the Paul Kruger Hospital. I'm not sure whether this still exists. It's on the compound of the hospital. Beautiful, beautiful building, almost Herbert Baker-like gables there. The Moth Hall still exists. It looks pretty good. And then the Magistrate's offices still exist, beautiful condition. And the government building was then demolished long ago. Rustenberg, early industrial buildings, the industries of the tobacco industry, citrus fruits, and cotton happened here, and these are the kind of buildings that decorated the fringes of the city, of the town. This is a very important slide, it's almost my last one, is to pose the question, what remains of what we've seen now in Rustenberg today? So I've superimposed all the research that I've done onto Church Street. This is where the church Plaats was, and we have a beautiful shopping center covering the entire church square today. The focal point, the heart of the city, is now a shopping mall. This is what the view towards the east looks like. And this is what the view onto what was the church. This is what it looks like now. I've tried to fly over the city with Google Earth and see where we still have little gems, and I can see there are a few heritage buildings picking from behind advertisements, paint colors, reverberations, etc. Still there in this vicinity. But yes, this was the checkmate. And it's not uncommon for a church square to become a market square, and then later on an institutional square. It's just our developers don't understand how to deal with the spaces and the bones of a city. Okay, so I'm leaving you with this. This was the view onto the church, beautiful trees, our significant syringa tree pride of position there, and then this is what it compares with today. I thank you for this opportunity.